Okay, good day and welcome to 298. This is week 14, and to a large extent, considering we have just 2 more weeks of school and then the final, I think we're in the rounding up phase of the class or of the course. And so far this semester, we have gone through a comparison between what's a website and what's a web app, data centers versus cloud computing, cloud security, cloud computing cost. You've done your web development. Um, we've set up an AWS account. We use the free tier so that we don't have to pay anything out of pocket. And, we set that up as well. We tried securing our AWS account using two-factor authentication and also by creating a separate IAM user so that we don't always have to log in with our root account. We saw how we could deploy a static website to S3 bucket. And after doing that, we also looked at how we can deploy the same content or the same website to an EC2 um, resource in AWS. Last week, we started looking at interacting with REST services or other APIs. I spun off a REST service for each of you within one of my EC2 instances. And I believe by now everybody has actually interacted with that web service and either created or at least loaded some data through the web service to display on their website or on your website. And while that is an example, there are tons of other web services out there that you could really use in your web application or in your website. Actually, let me real quick. Some of them are going to be free, some of them are not going to be free. But if I do free REST service, REST APIs, right? I'm trying to see. I've used some in the past. I know there was one I used to pull a list of, was it a list of countries or a list of colleges in the JavaScript class? There are quite a list of a bunch of them. Let me see what this is. This is a movie database. What does that do? Go to API docs. Let's see what that does. No API key provided. So even though this is supposed to be free, this is not free because, well, maybe it's free, but you still need an API key. So the API I created for the class, you didn't need an API key because it's just for the class. Normally, to use an API, you need a way to authenticate. Now, based on your authentication is how the API determines whether one you're allowed to access the API. Because imagine if all REST services or all REST APIs are openly or publicly available without any constraint, then I mean a lot of APIs would not be able to sustain the request level. But you'll be most times you'll be asked to sign up even if you won't have to pay for anything, but at least you'll be required to sign up with your email, username, password, all that. In some cases, they will give you an OAuth token. In some cases, they will give you what is known as a REST API, an API key, rather. Either which way, the whole idea is there is going to be a piece of information that you will have as a developer or as the organization that wants to consume an API. And that piece of information, you will need to pass it to the API each time you make request to the API. Okay. And when you do that, the first thing the API does is it checks that piece of information or your credential that you passed in to a few things. One is authentication. Are you the person that you say you are? Then after that, do you actually have access? Do you have access to this particular resource? And if you have access, what kind of data do you have access to? What is your daily limit? For example, let's say you have a daily limit of 24 requests per day. That's pretty low, but let's say you have a limit of 24 requests per day, which comes out to be 1 request per hour. If you've used up all your 24 requests within the first 1 hour, then you don't get to all your subsequent requests for that day will fail. So the API key or the auth token is how APIs in general, whether REST or SOAP or any of the others, basically safeguard their resources. Let's see, which other API do we have here? I don't know, cards, HTTP card, API memes. Let's see what news gives us. So this is going to be an example of another one. Of course, it wants us to get an API key. Let me see when I click on that, what does it give me? So it wants me to register. The good thing here is it's asking for name, email address, password, confirms whether you're an individual or not, all of that. Hopefully, after filling this page, it doesn't keep asking you for more stuff. It just sends you an API key via email, something like that, hopefully. But I'm not necessarily going to go through that. But for these guys, their API key is like this. Their API request is, they're using HTTPS. Of course, this is probably someone that's paid for an SSL certificate. Newsapi.org. Okay, V2, that means version 2. Everything. Q is what you're searching for. Tesla is the search string, so you're looking for news about Tesla. From says March 23rd, so news about Tesla from March 23rd, and you want to sort by published at, so the publication date. It doesn't tell me whether that is ascending or descending order, but I'm going to assume it's ascending order. And then you supply your API key here, right? That's really the format for most REST services. And imagine on your website, you could have this in one cell or in one column or in one div within your web page. Let's say your page is about, I think the example I used last week was restaurant. Let's say your website is about restaurants. You could have a small box somewhere in your on your website or on a web page under your website that basically shows news about restaurants, right? Or you could pull in a tweet or a Twitter feed, which is also something similar to a REST service that just shows in a small box on one side, right? So you could imagine this is your whole web. This page is your whole web page, and in this corner, maybe up here, you have the news API running. Down here, you might have maybe Twitter's news API, a Twitter feed with a custom keyword that you're looking for tweets about. Somewhere here, you could have maybe a feed about I don't know, maybe a NASA feed or something that you're getting through REST services running here. Here, you could be something. It could be a TikTok, the top TikTok feeds or services about whatever restaurants you are interested in. But then the main page, the main section of your web page is really where the content from your website is. So using REST APIs allows you to bring in all this data from multiple places into your web application. But that's not what I'm focusing on today. So back to what I was saying earlier, you could go online, go to Google, and search for different APIs. Try them first before you plug them into your application. Try making the requests directly, see what the result is, and see that it works, and then you can plug it into your application. Okay, so we've covered all this. I hope one way or the other you guys have learned one thing or the other beyond what you knew before. Then what is for this week and next week? I said this week and next week because really this last 2 weeks are just going to be for rounding up. Okay. I added another endpoint to the REST service for everybody, and the endpoint is /user endpoint. Okay, it will allow you to create a new user, because I noticed that everybody has the login thing on their website. So you will be able to create a new user. The user will be able to log in. Like we've seen before, there are two request methods. There is a post and there is a get. Okay. The user endpoint. So yeah, the user endpoint supports two get methods. The first one is /user, and the verb is list. I'll tell you what zone is in a second. The second one is /user, and the verb is get. The list simply gives you a list of your users. The get gives you a particular user. Now, zone is, for me, I call my zone PL because my web application is players, right? It was a Chelsea fan club. So when I create my users, the zone I supply to the request for creating them is PL. Okay. Each of you should also pick a 2-letter zone that you want and use that. I assume nobody's going to have a collision, as in everybody's 2-letter zone is going to be unique. I mean, if we are picking 2-letter zones, that means we have a potential combination of 2 to the power 26, if I'm right. So, but hopefully, all your zones are unique. So, for example, if you were to call this endpoint /user/list (zone equals whatever your zone is, it will give you a list of users that's been created for that zone. So my advice will be, before you create your first user, decide your zone, make a get request using that zone, and see if any user has been created for that zone. If no user has been created for that zone, then by all means use that zone. Okay, so there won't be any problem. If a user has been created for that zone, pick a different zone. If all of us do that, then we will not step on each other's toes. Of course, if this is in a in the real world, your application and the other company's application lives on different databases, so there won't be any chances. You won't need the concept of zone, and you won't step on each other's toes. Then if you get a list of your users, you will see the IDs are there as well, right? So you can actually drill down, and if you want to get a particular user, if you want to, you don't have to, but should you choose to, you can use user/get (zone equals your zone, ampersand ID equals the ID, just like you did for the others. You could including the ID. It's just that now you have to also include the zone. Okay. So I said earlier, the user endpoint supports two get methods. It also does support two post methods. And I believe between the two get methods and the two post methods, you have everything you need for user creation and for your login page. I mean, your login pages. So for the first post method, it's the create, which allows you to create a new user. If you're using the online Curl web page I used last week in my video, the curl request will look something like this. Of course, the post method, which is the post method is not the default for curl. Get is the default. So if you want to do a post, you have to tell it -x post, and I'm also telling it that the content type is JSON. -h is the header, and this is the REST API's IP address and port number. What is changing here is user/create. Okay. So let's say you were doing the list. All you needed was http://18.119.132.09.8080/user/list. That's it on the get. But this is a post and we are doing the create. So /user/create -d tick. Then this is our JSON object. I decided to just keep it simple. I know some people have more user properties on their web page, but just keeping it simple, I picked the common denominator across everybody. So there's email, which is whatever the email you want it to be. First name, last name, the zone, which is unique for each person in this class, and then the password. Yes, the password is plain text here. If you were dealing with in a real world situation, your password will be most likely encrypted with a key. The key will be something that both the client and the server understands. Okay. And then you probably even hash it and do some things to obscure it from anybody that is listening. But for the sake of this class, we're just going to keep the password plain like that. Don't encrypt it. Don't do anything. Just leave it like that. So email again, first name, last name, zone, password. Please notice that all these fields are case sensitive. This is first lowercases, the N is uppercase. Last, the N after last is uppercase. Okay. Email, you can create as many users as you like, excuse me, but the email address has to be unique. So once you create a user, once I create a user like this within my zone, I can't have another user with this email address. The password can be the same, it doesn't matter, but the email address is unique. The email address, if you're thinking about it for your website, it's the same thing as the user name. Okay, a lot of places will the email address will also piggyback as a username. Some places ask you to specify a different username, but let's just keep it simple. Email address is the same thing as username. Boom. So you can use this to create users if you want. You can, if you don't have a create account or sign up or register, if you don't have that on your web page or your website, you can use the Curl page to simply create users. But if you have that, then you can by all means have set that up within your registration page. I will show you how to do that in Ajax very soon. It's very simple, similar to what you've done so far. So this is the create endpoint. The other endpoint is login. Of course, after you create a user, the person should be able to log in. The login endpoint is very similar to the create endpoint. Very, very similar. If you're using Curl, everything is the same except that it's /user/login, right? And then the payload is a little bit smaller than the payload for creating, because for creating, we want the first name, we want the last name, we want all of that. For the login, we just need the BRS minimum. We need the email address. We need the password, plain text, again, don't forget. and we need the zone. Okay, those three things are all we need. And when you send this to the REST API, what it will do is it will return the user's object to you. So if you get the user's object back, you can always assume the user is found. So just assume the user is logging and redirect them to whatever page you need to redirect the user to. But if you don't get the user's object back, then that means something is wrong. Either you're using the wrong zone, or the email does not match, or the password does not match. Let's see. I think I have. Okay, yeah. So if you take a look at the original Ajax code I posted in Blackboard for what you've done so far in terms of getting the list of restaurants, news, events, whatever it is, players, movies. What's the other one? I think the other one is pictures or something from the REST service. A few modifications to that, and you can get your posts for create or post for login working. So, to start with, in my in the example I gave you, I made the function was called make get call. Call it whatever you want. Make post call, create my user. It doesn't matter. Just you know, just set the name to the function name to whatever you want it to be. Okay. The second thing is you need to change this type here to post, because it's get right now. You need to change it to post. Okay. The third thing, this function call here. So this right here, what you have up here is your function declaration, right? The function name equals the function, and you declare what the function does. This is line 3. 3 here is where you're actually calling the function. So you want to make sure that whatever name you give your function up here is the name that you are calling at 3 down here. Okay. Of course, you also, depending on what you're doing, whether you are creating or you are logging in, you want to change this to, instead of player list, you want to change it to user create or user login, depending on what you're doing. Okay. Now, the other part is where you do most of the work. All these changes that I just mentioned right now, they are very simple. How do you get the user's data into the, how do you get that to pass to the REST API? Right here, you have data, right? So a few things. You need to pass in your data object here, right? That's what will get encoded by jQuery and passed on to the REST service. You can create a data object before you get into this function and pass it as a second parameter. What do I mean by that? So to create your data object in JavaScript, all you need to do is it could be var or it could be let, whatever declaration you choose. I'm calling my object name user. That's just a variable name. Call it whatever you like. Coffee, I don't care. New user, anything. Equals, then the curly braces opens. First name, notice how I spelled it, uppercase N, because if you remember, if the previous example I gave, the previous screen, you need first name. I'm assuming this is the create page. If this is your create page, then you need first name, you need last name, you need email, you need zone, and you need the password. Okay, so first name, email, and every other thing, every other property that you need. Don't forget to put them in double quotes or single quotes, double quote or single quote, but just be consistent. But if this is your login page, or this is your login request, then all you need is your email. The email for the user, the password, and the zone. the email, the password, and the zone. My assumption is your user will type that, and you will use either JavaScript or jQuery either directly to capture that those values from the form. How you do that, if you do not know, please let me know. I can guide you, but my assumption is everybody knows how to do that. So those values are just what you are substituting here. Okay. Then um, you call your function. So instead of line 3 here, what I'm doing here is I said create user call. That's the name I chose to give my function. You give it whatever you like. Then the URL, right? HTTP colon slash slash 18 dot whatever all the way slash user slash create, because I'm assuming this is a create. Then I'm passing the object that I created right here, right? I'm passing that here. So at the bottom here, this 3 and 4, before it used to be just one input that, or one parameter that you are passing to the function. Now I'm adding a second parameter to it, comma user. Okay. And then when you come up back to 1, don't forget whatever name you gave 3 has to be the same name at 1. So I'm calling that create user call equals function, the URL, which is the first parameter, and then I called the second parameter my data. So here, instead of just underscore URL, to be underscore URL on comma my data, or whatever variable name you want to use at that point. Then everything else stays the same. Of course, you change your get to post, but this data line, this data property, it becomes data full colon my data, because my data is what I want to pass to the REST service. Notice that even though here it's data full colon open parentheses, open curly braces, close curly braces, when I have my data, I'm not putting curly braces before and after it. The curly braces I have here simply represent an empty object. But now that I actually have a data object that contains all the fields I want to pass on, I don't need those open and closing curly braces anymore. I'm just passing on my data, and everything else stays the same. Uh, of course, it's up to you what you want to do upon success. Okay. For example, if it is a create user, if you want to take them to a specific page after they register, by all means do that. If you want to take them, I don't know, or if it's a login page, if it's your login and you want to do something specific upon successful login, by all means, feel free to do that. But this example that you have here that is using display, this is for me to get a list of players. So you have to do whatever you want to do when you create or when you log in the user. So it's really not that much different, but I hope this actually um, helps you get an idea of how to go from what we had before, which was a get request, to where you need to be for the post request. And of course, your get request that you had before, if it's working fine, leave that as it is. Don't change that. You just need to make a copy of that JavaScript. I don't know what it's called. Maybe it was let's say photos page, photo list.js before. You might want to make a copy of that register.js or login.js and make your modifications in that one so that you don't mess up what you did before. One other thing, let me see. Okay, so for this week, or at least for the next 2 weeks, please include the login page on your web app, your website. Include a user creation if you have a registration, so include that as well, and send me the links to that by all means. Also, please, within the next 2 weeks before the end of the semester, I want you to work on your website. Make sure every page works. Make sure every page looks good. add more CSS to it. If you need help with CSS, let me know. If you need more, if you feel, oh, you know what, I've got a hold of, I've got a good hang of this REST service thing, and I want to load data from the database for more things. It's up to you. Let me know. Or maybe if you, let's say, if I mean, on on your photos page, you want to filter by maybe you want to list only pictures that have the you know, what's it called, there's landscape and portrait. Pictures that have landscape orientation, let me know. I can add that as a parameter for your list, you know, your list verb. If you need more functionalities, for, yeah, that's what I just talked about now. But it's important that, you know, before the end of the semester, you get, take a look at your web page. Go through every your web application. Go through every page. Ask yourself, is there a common theme amongst my web, amongst all these pages? The pages don't have to necessarily look alike, okay? But if this page is green and this page is pink and this page is brown, that's all over the place. You need to, it needs to have a common theme in terms of visuals. Your fonts, are they the same? Are the sizes um, relative to each other? Do you have a size 16 font on this page, and then a size 10 on everything on this other page is a size 10? There should be a theme going from one page to the other. Of course, one thing we could have done at the beginning, which I don't think is necessary, was we could have started out with a template, which will have probably made life a lot easier, but that's fine. But anyway, go through your web page, every single page, make sure it looks good. Make sure it behaves the way you want it to do. Um, your pages should be centered. What I mean is, wait, let's go to a few web pages. So take a look at this. If you notice, the register for API key is not jumped all the way to the top here. It's there's a gap. It's which kinds of makes it looks like this whole form is centered on the page, right? It's not squished all the way to the left either. So it has a balance. Even though this is just white and black, but it's still balanced. I have no problem with people using colors on their web pages, or you know, but please make sure it's clean. I'm trying to look at another, even the simplest one, google.com. No, not nothing much, but things are centered, right? Things are centered. Yes, there's this here, there's this here, and there's this here, but it still has a feel that your page is not skewed to the left or it's not skewed to the top. Make it centered, all right? And make sure if you have a form, let's go back to that one. If you have a form, for example, first name, then the text box is under here, right? Email address, then the text box is under here. It will look awkward if you have first name, the text box is under, email address, and the text box is right beside it. So there needs to be that uniformity across how you present data. Let's see, what else do I have here? I think this is my last slide. All right, so that's my last slide. All right, if anybody has any questions, please let me know. um, I'm going to assume that you will work on this between now and the end of the semester. I will post something next week. It might not be a video because my expectation is, at this point, I'm not introducing anything new anymore. But I need you to work on your user registration, login, and the look and feel, the layout of your web pages. Make them look good, make them look presentable. Okay? All right. Have a lovely rest of the week.